Hey, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Packet Protector, the podcast at the intersection of networking, security, and Drew's horrible taste in candy options. I'm Jennifer J.J. Manella here with my co-host, Drew Conry Murray, and we have a spooky news lineup for you guys today.
Yeah, it's our sort of semi-regular news roundup, and if you're curious about my bad candy choices, you have to stick around to the end of the episode for that. But we're going to cover college students snooping on satellite transmissions, several personal security conversations around email and browsing, some bind vulnerabilities that could enable DNS cache poisoning, who's going to hold U.S. carriers and service providers responsible for their security or lack thereof. We talk about a YouTube ghost network that got taken down, the issues around indirect prompt injection attacks, vulnerabilities you should know about, and more. Yeah, so let's jump right in. Our first one is about researchers at the University of California, San Diego, and the University of Maryland. They found large amounts of unencrypted traffic being broadcast by geostationary satellites, including cellular backhaul traffic that included voice calls and text messages, in-flight Wi-Fi services, including passenger search queries and in-flight entertainment, and military communications. The researchers say they were able to intercept this traffic using around $800 worth of gear, including a commercial off-the-shelf satellite dish. So, yeah, they just pointed a dish at the sky and found all kinds of interesting stuff.
It wasn't quite that simple, but I do applaud this research. Now, I will tell you that anytime I read something like this, I'm like, okay, this is a little bit sensationalized. A little bit, but not much. So I think we'll put links to their research report as well as a Wired article that has pretty good coverage. And I think the Wired article does a really good job of parsing through because they also spoke to some of the impacted parties. But yeah, so it was less than $1,000 worth of gear. And it was like a satellite dish that cost, $100. They acquired some mounting hardware because, you do have to aim these things, right?
Yeah, right.
So, and then they did some parsing and stuff of that traffic. So it did take them quite a while in their write-ups to, adjust this thing so that it got it was at the right angles, and then parse the data because it's not like it just came through in, formatted clear text for them. Right. It was unencrypted, but you still, anybody knows if you've ever tried to read something where there's no spaces and there's just, a whole bunch of letters and numbers strung together. It's hard to make sense of it.
Apparently, a lot of these geostationary satellites have multiple transponders, and these transponders all use different protocols. So they did have to develop what they call the traffic parser to interpret all these different protocol stacks used by the transponders to decode some of these signals into IP packets that they could then read. So there was some barrier to entry, but again, it wasn't high, particularly if you are a nation state, for example, say.
Yeah, so I thought this was really interesting. So some of the things that they broke down, like the description that you read about, voice calls, text messages. Interestingly, was actually a lot of validity to those things, and some of the carriers they did. So this project, their research was 3 years of work, and it sounds like they spent almost most of the past year just simply doing disclosures.
Right, before they published, yeah.
Before they published. So this is all pretty new. I mean, they've been working on it for a while. It's all pretty new and they're still slow rolling some of the information as these things get fixed. But they did reach out. There were several carriers, including T-Mobile, cited that it sounds like that, a subcontractor who was managing, the satellites didn't quite have something configured the way that it should have been. It was a misconfiguration on their part. So it was really interesting to see that. Some of the other carriers basically said, we don't use satellite for backhaul, so you're not going to see our stuff. But they did get numerous voice calls and text messages to the tune of like thousands within a few minutes.
Right.
And then the next thing you mentioned, I think, was like in-flight Wi-Fi. That I'm kind of like, eh. So some of the stuff they mentioned was that some of the streaming media was being sent unencrypted. And if it's, a lot of that is that in-flight, like the in-system entertainment where they host the thing, they host the box there in the plane with certain things cached on it so that you can stream from that.
Yeah.
So if it was, if it's that, I don't really care if it's encrypted or not, but they also cited certain other websites and corporate email that they were able to get certain
Right.
unencrypted. Now that, that's a little sus, a little sketchy to me. I don't think they're lying about that. I kind of wonder is that somebody using, they rolled their own mail server or something at home
Mhm.
and it's not encrypted properly. And then the military communications, not U.S. military. So they were angled. So a lot of the stuff is, coming from Mexico. So they were angled, being in the Southwest U.S., they were kind of angled out that way
Mhm.
as opposed to being on the East Coast or in the middle of the country. So they did pick up a bunch of stuff from our neighbors down there. And that's where I think some of the military communications came from.
Yeah. So it's not like a super crazy emergency or something to freak out about, but really interesting research and kind of fun to see what, some dedicated folks can kind of cobble together uh, with these kinds of satellite transmissions. And also, I think just a good reminder, like if you are relying on satellite communications, you do want to go check some configurations.
Yeah. And well, I think the other point in that is you may not know who in your supply chain is using satellite for
Right.
backhaul,
Right.
because a lot of the other stuff it wasn't mentioned in your intro there, I don't think, but some of the other things that they did find were like OTICS in power distribution.
Hmm. Hmm.
So anytime there's stuff that's kind of far away, especially like out in the middle of nowheres, stuff does often get routed through satellite. So I think this is just, it's really interesting work that they did. I love how they present it in their summary. And I do think that this work just kind of people as users and enterprises understanding that some of your stuff may be, you don't know what happens to it when you're sending it from point A to point B and you're relying on other people's infrastructure to get it there. We do have to, if we care about stuff, we have to secure it at the layers we have control over and not assume other people are doing it for us.
Right. I think the other thing to note is that because these are satellites, you can scoop up a pretty wide swathe of data with just one satellite because it's going up to space and back. And so you just get a huge amount of space. I think in their write up, they said, a single transponder may be visible from an area as large as 40% of the surface of the Earth. So,
Yeah, I did wonder about that because they talked about the hundreds of hours they spent tuning the angle of their dish.
mhm.
Now it could be, again, they're using a $100 consumer satellite dish, so it could be that it's just, maybe a more powered, a larger commercial grade dish can do more. I don't know, but certainly, yeah, if you're in the right if you're in the right space at the right time, you can get juicy stuff. So I'm really interested in this. And I think, did you say that one of the researchers, because there were several researchers from different universities involved in this, have we talked to some of them before?
Yeah, Dr. Dave Levin, he's at the University of Maryland. He was a guest on Packet Protector. He's also been a guest on a few other Packet Pushers podcasts to talk about some of the research he's involved in, him and his graduate students. So we'll have a link in the
Yes,
show
yes.
notes if you're curious to see. When I saw that it was University of Maryland, I was like, oh, I wonder if Dr. Levin was involved in this. And yes, he was, because he always finds these really interesting, often security-related projects to work on. So,
Yeah, so good stuff. Definitely check out those two links we've got there.
yeah. All right, we'll move on. So how much stolen credential data is out there? Security researchers have assembled a data set of 3.5 terabytes of stolen credentials they found online, including 183 million email accounts, millions of which are Gmail accounts. And the publication or the notice that this data set existed prompted a flurry of media stories about how to check if your email address and password are among the stolen credentials and how to protect yourself going forward. So 183 million compromised accounts sounds pretty sensational, JJ.
It does. And I think that was part of the problem. And I actually read several versions of this story, different places, because each one, did their own research and poking into things. Because it wasn't 183 million. Like, this isn't some new breach where something got breached, but basically researchers were scraping off of other info stealers and
Yes.
from prior breaches.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the meta analysis, right?
Right. It's like what's out there, what can we find? Let's put it all in one place is what these security researchers did. It's not a net new breach. So it's
Yeah.
not like out of the blue 183 million accounts are newly compromised.
But there were 14 to 16 million that were new.
Could have been, yeah. There's a lot of different public blogs on this that I didn't get to read all of, but yeah, what that could be.
Yeah, so some of them were new. And I think what was interesting, now there is the website, I think it's Troy Hunt that manages it. It's like Have I Been Pwned?
Hmm.
Where you can check, you can put in your email address and check and see. Now, at first blush, I think if you're like me and you're a little bit paranoid, you're like, oh no, you crafty hacker, you're trying to harvest my email accounts. But it is a legitimate site that's sponsored by 1Password and another commercial entity. And I think it does do a good job of like scrubbing through all of that data and then showing you. So for example, I put one of my, one of my Gmail accounts,
Hmm.
that I don't
To
really use, but we'll talk about attack chains here in a second. Um, and it was like, there was a 2020 Gravatar breach, the little, when you do blog, like if you make a comment on somebody's blogs, there was that
yes.
little Gravatar thingy where you logged in and made an account.
Yep.
So stuff like that, it'll tell you where is your email address showing up, and then it tells you how it came about, that data, basically, where did it come from. So it is a really good tool if you're interested, you want to check your stuff, or friends and family. But I think the good takeaway from this underscores just some of the 101 like hygiene that we should be doing. Like, let's just take enterprise stuff out for a second and just think about us as consumers and users
Hmm.
of technology. So things that you should be telling, like, everybody, even the non-technical people in your life, right? Don't reuse passwords from site to site, because if that gets scraped from one site, then they can potentially get into something else. So if you're reusing things, or if they can get enough data that they see a pattern where, it's, Fluffy my cat 1 2 3, Fluffy my cat 1 1 2 3 4, like,
Yeah.
if you're revving numbers up or adding like other characters or names, or I know, people for a while would do something like, my fluffy cat at Facebook was their Facebook password or something like that.
Hmm.
So all somebody needs is like one or two of those sample points to then guess what your other password is going to be.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge, huge, huge supporter of password managers. So this is one thing, and like, even technologists in my life, and security people. Well, I think security professionals don't do this, but a lot of people in tech still use the browser
Right.
credential caches,
Yes.
which they've gotten better over time, but a lot of times they're not encrypted. It is easy to scrape. There's not validation from like plugins or other apps that can reach into that space. So they're getting better. So if somebody's like, "Oh, well, Chrome just did this secure upgrade." Yes. But in general, they're horrible. They're easily scraped. And even if you think they're in a kind of a secure enclave, because that's in the browser, and the browser's scrapable. So using a password manager, which is its own container, its own entity. And I've heard people say things like, well, then all my eggs are in one basket and I'm really screwed if somebody gets into that. Yes, but the chances of somebody getting into that are slim to none unless you do something really stupid,
Which has happened, we should say.
which has happened. But if you're doing something really stupid, you're also going to be screwed if they get into your browser credential cache.
Mhm. Yeah, I think was it Last Password that had a dev who got
They did. Yep.
breached? Yeah, so it is kind of like, well, what am I supposed to do? But I do think a password manager is, uh, out of all the options, probably the best option. Not a foolproof option, but the best of not necessarily an ideal bunch. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's where you can say, eat your security veggies if you wanted to.
Oh, I missed my opportunity. You did it
Yeah,
for me.
I know. So don't reuse passwords. Tell your friends, tell your family, use a password manager. Don't save them in the browser.
Yeah.
Help yourself.
I guess Google also has a password manager checkup tool that will, look and see if your accounts of your passwords have been used or been discovered in breaches.
Yeah. Now, again, that's if you're saving passwords in Chrome, which I'm I'm personally not a fan of. And in fact, in a corporate environment, so for those of you that are involved on the corporate side, through whether you're using like Intune or an MDM or group policy, we actually like would disable that so that nobody can accidentally save anything into a browser. But if I guess the order of operations there is a password manager is far better than anything else. A not close second would be putting it into the browser. I personally would never save a credential in a browser, and I don't say never often. But yeah, so if you are using that in Chrome, they do have a checkup. Most of the password managers have that built in as well. So they're checking on the dark web, and they will pop up little alerts and tell you if any of your sites and credentials have been seen in that database as well.
Anything else on this before we move on?
No, I think we can keep talking about Google though, can't we?
Yeah, we are going to stick with Google. So they have set up a new feature called recovery contacts. The idea is that if you forget a password or lose a device that has your passkey, you can designate a friend or family member as a recovery contact. And I tried to find details on this, and I read a Google blog, but it doesn't have a lot of details, so I'll just tell you what it said. Quote, when you reach out to one of your recovery contacts for help, you will share a code with them. They will get an email or notification and can confirm that it's really you by verifying that code, helping you securely regain access to your account, end quote. So the idea is it's just one more layer of recovery, but now it's instead of something you know and something you have, apparently it's somebody you know.
It is. I understand what they're trying to do. And I do think this is a little bit morbid, but I do think like most people, we just, we humans need some way to deal with situations in the account of a lockout or a death of somebody, right? I feel like we need to plan for that. I don't, I'm a little bit skeptical about this. It's not something I would personally. I think this is right. Choose your own risk model, right? I personally would not enable this and use it because what I see, back to that whole kind of attack chain and attack path is, if now all of my friends and family are my weakest link. And if their threat model is not the same as my threat model, I've just kind of downgraded to them because it would be easy or trivial for somebody potentially to get into a friend or family's, personal email account, get in the middle of this. And even if it's okay, well, they need to verify it's you. We have all of the deep fake audio.
Right.
Can you imagine if all you have to do is do a podcast once or twice and somebody's got enough audio. You do them way more than weekly. You do like 600 a week. I don't even know what you do.
Yeah,
it's not quite true, but it's close.
You and I would both be, there's plenty of material out there for us to have our voices faked for sure.
Yeah.
Although,
actually, one of my banking like retirement account things, it was like, oh, your voice is now your password and say these phrases. And I'm like, no, just kept saying no until it gave up and let me choose like an 8-digit pin as another layer for something. Because we have so anyway, going back to, are you relying on, friends and family, their security, their steps to verify you're actually asking for a password reset, an account recovery? Personally, I see why some people might want to use this, and it's a good idea for some people. I will not be using it.
I totally get why you're saying that, but to flip it on its head, I think in some cases, like for me, I do a lot of tech support kind of stuff for my mom, and this would be an ideal use case for that, where I would be her recovery contact.
Yeah.
Because she kind of needs that help, and I would feel more comfortable knowing that if something was happening with her accounts, I could be the one to be like, yes, I'm going to help you verify and do this recovery, as opposed to, her being confused about the 8 million other steps she should do. So I think
that makes sense.
There are cases where this could be a good thing.
Yeah.
But again,
I totally
your
agree
risk
with that
model may vary.
Yeah. Yeah. So if the person who's your recovery buddy has better security and awareness than you do, then yes. And I don't think that puts anybody at risk. But if it's the other way around, I would definitely, because, back to, if you look at enterprise or even if you look at your own personal stuff and you think about the things that are tied to email,
Oh yeah.
what can somebody do? And it's like pretty much every account. And this is why, I'm a little bit paranoid about things. Most accounts that you have a backup account. So
Mm-hmm.
like your email, your corporate may even be tied to a personal as a backup for recovery purposes if you need it. Your Gmail may have my Outlook account has like backup accounts tied to it. So there is a chain here of it might be that, oh, like I mentioned earlier, I tested, in that have you been pwned thing, I put in a Gmail account I don't really use for anything. However, it's possible that Gmail account is a backup for something else that I'm not thinking about.
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of have to think through the whole chain of where is that weakest link, at least for 2 or 3 hops.
All right. So don't, contact JJ on LinkedIn and volunteer to be her recovery buddy.
I
She's
will
going to
have
tell
no
you no.
recovery buddies. I would rather be locked
She's
out.
going it alone.
Yep. I'd rather be locked out than risk somebody else being able to get in.
All right. Hardcore. Links in the show notes if you want to look into this for yourself, but we'll move on. Although sticking with the theme of personal privacy, Firefox is going to now require all new browser extensions to disclose whether they collect or transmit personal data. That requirement is going to begin November 3rd, 2025. That disclosure must be included in a JSON manifest for the extension, and when the user adds the extension, information about what the extension collects or transmits is then displayed to the user. My immediate reaction is, nice feature, glad to see it. I am all for clear disclosure about personal data collection and transmission. I don't think it's going to have a material impact, except for people like JJ and maybe me who are really dialed in on personal privacy.
Okay, here's why I like this. And maybe between now and when we release this, I'll try to dig up this other story and link it in here. One of the things that happens in the world is there are lots of browser extensions. So unlike, okay, let's talk about phones and phone app stores. Whether it's Apple or Google, there's a certain vetting that an app goes through and the developer goes through before it gets onto the app store. It's not perfect. It's actually quite flawed. And then the developer can make changes to that app and it does not go through the same revalidation. But at least it's something. Browser extensions don't really even have that same level, even in that flawed state.
Right.
And so there are apps, there are browser extensions out there who exist to scrape data, including credentials, out of your browser cache, because that's the permissions, right? When you install something into a browser, what are you giving it permissions to? You don't know. So what is it doing? It could be collecting your browsing and viewing history. It could be collecting credentials. It could be looking at other things that you have installed in the browser.
Location data, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, it could be location data, all sorts of stuff. And there is this mass of these apps or these extensions that are legally collecting that and then selling it.
Yep.
And it's interesting because some of the people that they're selling it to are not even like, malicious actors who are going to try to extort you. But like debt collectors and like lawyers and weird list of types of organizations that are using them for other purposes.
So here's an idea then, maybe Mozilla Foundation, if you're on the off chance you're listening, maybe something else that should be added to this requirement is, are you selling data that you're collecting? Because maybe that would actually have more of an impact of people being like, oh, wait, okay, you're selling this. I think that might resonate more to the broader populace than, oh yeah, they're collecting my location information, whatever, I need this extension. So
yeah. I would love to see more transparency in that because I think, I got a little bit of flack, but mostly support when I posted on LinkedIn the other day that I for the final time, like I'm air quoting cybersecurity professional, expert, whatever, went on the local news and like just fed the FUD of like, oh, you should never connect to public Wi-Fi when you're outside of your house. And look, I don't use public Wi-Fi unless I have to. And then I do a lot of stuff to try to make that as secure as possible. However, to the general public, And really to most users, like there are so many other things to worry about, like all of these things that sit on your browser extensions and are scraping data.
Right.
And so, you know, you just have to take risk, these different vulnerabilities and risk in context and prioritize them. And I do think this is an important one because you don't know
Right.
and you don't know where it's going. You don't know who's got it and you don't even know what they took.
Right. Yeah, just to be clear, I'm 100% glad Mozilla's doing this. I would love to see all of the browser makers do this, including, the new AI browsers. Um, so all for it. Yeah, 100%. And if you were listening, you heard us say that it applies to new extensions. The requirement will also be rolled out to all existing extensions as well. And Mozilla is going to implement that during the first half of 2026 to give the developers time to catch up. But it is going to encompass all extensions in Mozilla. So yeah, let's get this out there. Let's make it a thing. Moving on, the widely used bind software for resolving domain names has two critical vulnerabilities that enable attackers to poison DNS caches, thus resulting in the potential for malicious actors to redirect users to imitation sites and malicious sites.
Yeah, we're kicking it back old school here. I think all of us who are of a certain vintage remember, Dan Kaminsky back in the early 2000s with the DNS vulnerabilities that he, did proof of concepts for and kind of really stirred up attention in the space. And I think I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole. I'm not going to get on the soapbox, but I do think how we resolve host names and move traffic around the internet is a huge risk. Like it's very risky we don't do a good job validating authenticity. We don't do a good job securing that. There's not integrity in that system except for in small pockets where we've, added DNSSEC or, routing protocol integrity. And we've covered that before on Packet Protector with, some of the routing security protocols and things that we've got initiatives from in the government.
We did a show on RPKI with Russ White.
Yeah.
If you want to check that out.
So this is sort of in the same vein. And I think there were 3 CVEs that they released that I think they said affect nearly all current versions before this patching. So basically, if you have this and you haven't patched it, and it's used pretty broadly. But I think a few things here. It just underscores our reliance on these basic network services that were never designed to be secure from the beginning, and now we really have to be intentional about securing them moving forward, especially in the world where our daily lives. I mean, the AWS outage.
Right.
Look, was that 10 yeah. So that was on the 20th. We're recording this the night before Halloween. But on the 20th, I was lucky enough to be traveling for work and not sitting at my desk trying to do things. But the AWS outage, which is ultimately a DNS configuration, it's the house of cards that the whole internet is riding on top of.
Yes, pretty much DNS and BGP. It's usually either one or the other. So, all right, links in the show notes. We'll move on. Checkpoint software researchers have published a report on a YouTube ghost network in which thousands of YouTube accounts were used to coordinate the distribution of info-stealing malware disguised as pirated versions of popular software such as Photoshop or as gaming cheats. The network's been active since at least 2021. Google has apparently taken down more than 3,000 videos that were part of the network. Some of the accounts hosting these videos were legitimate accounts and they were compromised. And as part of the network, attackers actually created accounts that were just there to add likes and comments to these malicious videos hosting the malware to make them seem more trustworthy. So this was a real coordinated effort.
It was. Ooh,
Ghost network.
Ghost network.
Excellent timing, by the way, for recording.
So appropriate, yes.
Before Halloween.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting because they delivered info stealers. So back to we're downloading stuff that's scraping credentials from various places, right? We didn't mean for these stories to be connected, but there's kind of a common thread.
There is a theme
a lot
here,
of
yes.
these. But yeah, the Ghost Network, which I think I think it was Checkpoint that did a lot of this research and came up with this phrase or terminology that, a collection of fake or ghost accounts that are operating as a collaborative service. And I think that's so interesting because one of the things that they do, and I think, look, I'm I'm not a fan of pirating software. I'm not one of those people who goes out and tries to find like the free version of things online.
Hmm.
But I do know that a lot of people like are in tough spots and they're trying to find a game or a piece of software, Photoshop, whatever. Like there's no way they can afford it. They just need to maybe try to get through a little project or something.
Hmm.
So I'm not advocating for that, but a lot of times they'll give you some reason why you need to disable, EDR or your firewall. The
As
file's
part of
too
the instructions
big.
to download. Okay.
Yeah, they do. And so
Right.
what happens, most users don't think anything about it because they're just trying to get something done. It's like, okay, fine. And it says, it'll pop up some legitimate looking thing like this download is too large to be parsed by, Windows firewall or whatever. So, disable this and then download this and you can re-enable things. But it works, and I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head. So I know you said they had like 3,000 videos that they took down.
Hmm.
Um, but out of those 3,000 videos, there were uh, like tied to lots of downloads. So
Yeah.
be careful out there, people.
I have to say you're more generous than me because after reading this story, I was like, well, you were trying to get some pirated software, so maybe I don't feel that
Yeah,
much
I
sympathy.
know. But I'm kind of thinking like, there's a lot of students, who are going through school and they're trying to do a project and it's like something's happened and I just need to save this as a PDF or whatever. And yes, now there's free PDF things, but I'd like to give people the benefit of the doubt and not just assume that if you're doing something bad, you're a bad person.
Good on you,
Good
JJ.
people can do bad things. You are not what you do
I will get off my
unless you
high
just keep
horse.
doing it.
Yeah. Right.
In which case you're a bad person.
You get a couple of chances. You get a couple of
Yeah.
chances, but yeah.
Yes.
All right. In our last news roundup, we talked about how security researchers at Radware used indirect prompt injection attacks against ChatGPT's deep research agent to exfiltrate email from a target's Gmail account. There's been more stories released about indirect prompt injection, and this is when attackers will seed malicious prompts or instructions into things like files that are going to be consumed by an agent. The instruction can be hidden from users, for example, by using white text on a white background, but it still is read by the agent. Some security researchers who work for the Brave browser have published information about indirect prompt injection weaknesses in AI browsers. Specifically, they went after Perplexity's Comet browser. That browser includes a feature in which if a Comet user takes a screenshot of a web page, it can ask questions about the image. The researchers demonstrated how they were able to hide instructions in the image, and then the browser followed those hidden instructions, which in this case were to open the user's email app. The researchers also found some similar vulnerabilities in another AI browser, and they reported these issues to both companies. Thoughts,
I was
JJ?
I was listening to I'm trying to wrap my head back around this because
It's a
for a
lot.
second I'm not familiar with these browsers. So I thought you said the comic browser and I'm like, "Oh, is that a thing?"
Comet.
Cuz that sounds cool. A comic
Comic
browser
sounds
where you
nice.
just
Yes. It's,
like
it's
maybe
all in
get the
Comic
X, Y, X, D.
Sans.
No. No, there is no Comic Sans in JJ's world.
No, it is the Comet browser. Yes.
Okay. The prompt injections all over the place just frighten me and because it is a no touch thing, right? You don't know what's happening. And I feel like it's just an easy way to leak and steal all sorts of information from all of these connected apps. And one of the things, just as a user, that I'm getting scared of is I had done a good job personally, like not enabling Copilot, you know,
Uh-huh.
or
Gemini
Zoom's
or,
AI
yep.
agent or
Yep.
whatever.
Hmm.
And then it's like it doesn't like that you didn't enable it. And so then it updates itself so that it is auto enabled. Um, and you may or may not be able to disable it. And so, I think while I think AI is overhyped, I mean I think it's transformative for everybody.
Hmm.
But I do think it's overhyped in a lot of ways. However, I think one of the things that's not overhyped are the risk associated with it from a security, just a cybersecurity and privacy perspective.
Yes.
Because these browsers, I mean, if you think about over the past several years, we have kind of gone from the model of where we had lots of applications, like full, let me download this application,
Hmm.
to things that are web based.
Hmm.
And so now you're talking about, bring not just bringing AI into that, but basically putting that into AI where it has access to everything.
Well, that's the whole
And
point of agentic AI is that it can take actions on your behalf, which means it needs a set of permissions to be able to do things. It needs access to things. It needs, login and roles and to be able to fulfill functions. So yeah, it just, you know,
yeah, I don't think we're at the point though that it makes sense because when you can put white text on a white background and tell an AI agent to go look at your email and scrape it and then send it out to a public server,
right.
I'm sorry. Put the training wheels back on and figure your stuff out. Like this is not meant. We can't just roll this out to people and shove it down their throats and expect it to be okay.
Oh, but that's what we're doing. That is
It's
exactly what we're
like
doing.
leeches.
So there's we'll link to it. The Register has a good story about this, about the research from Brave, but also talking about AI agents and other risks. And the article notes that Brave reached out to Perplexity and said, "Hey, we found this," and Perplexity took some steps to adjust things in its Comet browser to try to fix this. It's not like an individual vulnerability that you just write a software upgrade for. It is a class of attacks that target the very function of the tool, which is to read instructions and execute them. So that means for organizations, if your employees are using AI browsers and AI agents, you have to put in the work to understand what permissions and capabilities these tools have, find out what data they're trying to access, monitor that behavior, make sure humans are in the loop, make sure you've got the right permission levels and controls around these agents. And that is a moving target. It's really hard to do.
It is. And I mean, ChatGPT just came out with what, the Atlas browser,
Yes. Yep.
which is its AI browser that replaces Google with ChatGPT, basically.
That's what they're hoping.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And I think just last week ish, probably the episode with Chuck Kessler on model context protocol dropped.
Hmm.
So Chuck is the CISO at a software company that's highly agile. They're using a lot of AI and MCP, and I think there's some good advice in that with how organizations and security professionals responsible for the organization should be thinking about AI and ways to leverage it, but monitor it so that we don't just YOLO our stuff all over the internet.
Yeah. Well, as always, links in the show notes. We'll get into some compliance news now. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, is going to hold a vote in November about whether to undo some cybersecurity requirements for U.S. telecom carriers. These requirements were proposed under the prior leadership of the FCC in the wake of the revelations of the Salt Typhoon attacks, in which nation-state actors were shown to have seriously compromised these carrier networks. The current FCC chairperson Brendan Carr wrote in a blog post that he believes the prior administration overstepped its legal authority and that the FCC doesn't have the power to create a cybersecurity compliance framework. I dug a little bit to look at what the previous administration had proposed, and it was essentially that carriers should create, update, and implement cybersecurity and supply chain risk management plans, ideally following some kind of existing industry framework, and that executives, including the CEO, would sign off on these plans and present them on a regular basis to the FCC to make sure they were being followed. And that's what Brendan Carr wants to undo. I have some feelings, JJ, but I'll let you go first if you have thoughts.
We probably have similar thoughts. I mean, I'm torn on this. So, the first thing is um I'm very apolitical. Like I just don't like politics and I don't like government intervention in things other than like basic services and safety and things like that. So on the one hand, I'm kind of like, okay, maybe they don't need to do all this and present it to the FCC. On the other hand, it's like when you read that package on the back, it says, do not eat this Tide Pod. And, something bad happened for us to get that. And we look at Salt Typhoon, we know that China's been in our telecom infrastructure for years. We know that they continue. We know that we have gaps. So I do feel like something needs to happen. And, the hard part here is, you know, I don't know that it needs to be prescriptive. I like the way you described it, that like they needed to create and implement cybersecurity following existing frameworks. That makes sense to me. It's not, super prescriptive. Just, you need to be doing your 101 hygiene,
Right. Yeah.
but they haven't been. And, I think telecom is notorious for just doing what they want to do, trying to minimize their cost, and just assume, a little bit of security by obscurity, that if you don't understand how their infrastructure is created and their architecture is developed and what they're doing, that you don't have to worry about it. But the reality is telecom's running on, it's like hospitality, right? They don't want to spend money on technology, and
Yeah.
certainly not security.
Yeah, for sure.
So how do I don't think they need to go in and replace, you know, millions or billions of dollars of infrastructure to do this. But I do think that the telecoms need to have some responsibility and accountability
Yes.
if they're providing a public service, and they are critical infrastructure. By definition from CISA, they are one of the 16 sectors.
Uh-huh.
And communications and telecom all over the world is considered critical infrastructure in their respective geographies. So my mixed feelings are: does the FCC have the right to do that? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't like politics. I don't like law. I don't like any of that. But somebody needs to hold accountable critical infrastructure, especially telecom, because if that is attacked in a meaningful way, in an intentional way, because right now they've just been establishing persistence and crawling through and like doing very small targeted things.
Uh-huh.
If a nation state were to decide to take out whole chunks of our telecom infrastructure here, it would not be hard for them to do that.
Right.
And it would be extremely disruptive.
Yep. Yep.
People would die.
Right. Right. Just E911 alone, taking that
Right.
offline would be, yeah. Yeah, our feelings do kind of align. I think a lot of like sort of government or industry enforced compliance regulations tend to turn into a checkbox exercise rather than a risk management exercise. And so you don't end up moving the needle and making things more secure. On the other hand, this is critical infrastructure. And if it's not the FCC having some authority over these organizations to try to enforce some kind of security framework, then who is? Like the private sector is not going to ding them for being insecure. So yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I'm curious to see if the current administration, which is definitely anti-regulation, so of course they'd want to be like, yeah, we're not doing this. Do they have some other proposal for how to handle cybersecurity in the telecom and carrier sector? If so, I would be happy to see it. So I guess we'll find out going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'd like to see something.
Yeah. All right, a couple more stories before we wrap. In a paper published in the science journal Nature, Google says it used an out-of-order time correlator, or OTOC algorithm, which they're calling quantum echoes, to compute the structure of a molecule.
I'm sorry. Let's just pause for a second. I wish you guys could see Drew right now. What was that thing you just did with, like, you just did with your shoulders?
I'm trying to like spice it up. Quantum echo.
Spice it up. Yeah, he was gyrating over there with the quantum echoes comment. Okay, please, sir, do continue.
Yes. So what they're saying is they have demonstrated with this chip and this algorithm what they're calling quantum advantage, which means that a quantum computer is more efficient or more capable at performing a task that a traditional computer can't. They also said they ran an experiment where they checked their work against a scan by a nuclear magnetic resonance machine. So they do say we have valid proof that we have demonstrated quantum advantage with this chip and this algorithm for performing a task. They say this with this Willow quantum chip, they were able to compute the structure of a molecule 13,000 times faster than a classical algorithm on a supercomputer.
I mean, this is really just the latest in a steady stream of these breakthroughs. And I think it's really cool because I do, unlike AI, I don't think quantum is overhyped. In fact, I think it's underhyped in a lot of
Oh,
ways.
interesting.
Yeah, we could have a debate about that one day, maybe. But it's potential, especially in the medical space and science. I think is fantastic. But also, as they're making advancements in that, we on the technology side have to deal with the impact of when these things start doing what they're doing. Shor's algorithm, Grover's algorithm basically breaks asymmetric encryption, and then later symmetric encryption and hashes. And so all of anything that's asymmetric encryption, which is basically anytime we have two things that are remote from each other and need to exchange keys, right, with PKI,
Yep.
all of that will be broken quickly. And I think that's happening sooner and faster than a lot of people think it will. So a lot of the predictions are like 2030 to 2035 for
Hmm.
that.
Hmm.
But we've seen so much infusion of money, and so many advancements in a short time period because quantum's not new. I mean, the World Quantum Congress just celebrated its 100 years of quantum. This dates back into the early 1900s,
Right.
frankly. Like,
Yep.
right, when we discovered quantum entanglement and wave theory and things like that. So this is not new. And we had John on several episodes ago, and she has a really interesting take because she has so much of a physics background, um, and understanding how that applies to tech. But long story short, there are some other estimates by people who follow this closely who think that by 2028, which is really just, you're talking about now less than 3 years away because we're at the end of 2025,
Right.
um, that we could have quantum computers that have broken asymmetric encryption by that time.
Hmm. Which, the homework for listeners is, do you have a post-quantum cryptography plan in place? Algorithms are out now. PQC algorithms are out. All the vendors are making efforts to upgrade their equipment to support them. So it's good for you to have a plan or a strategy in place around this.
Yeah. And I'm not going to get on that soapbox because we want to hit some quick rapid fire vulnerabilities that you guys should know about. But maybe I'll soapbox another day on that.
All right, go ahead. Hit us rapid fire.
Rapid fire? Oh, okay. So I think there's maybe 4 or 5 vulnerabilities that you guys should know about that are happening now. The Cisco vulnerability related to SNMP has been updated, in during October. So it first came out at the beginning of September. So we'll put some links in there. There are some updated indicators of compromise to look for. So basically, if you thought that was over, it's not, or it might not be. So dust off the emails you had about that and revisit that. The next one has to do with the critical vulnerability in the Windows Update Service, so WSUS. Do people call it WSUS? Is that a thing? I don't. But do other people? I don't know.
I would if I used Windows. Yes.
So there were just some updates. This is relatively new, but it was updated just yesterday from CISA. And Microsoft had released like an unscheduled update and a patch, but that actually did not mitigate the issue. So they're reworking that a little bit. There's additional guidance on how to check for compromise and what security teams should do for a workaround. So that's definitely something to check out because the problem is if you're not familiar with that or you don't manage it, that is the update server for Windows is the thing that pushes out everything to all of the endpoints.
That's a bad thing to have compromised.
Yeah, because you could easily just push out malware or
Yeah, exactly.
change the security settings or do whatever you wanted to do. So that is a service and a server that has admin rights to push to endpoints. So not good there.
Nope.
The next one is Lancope. So I know that this is used heavily in the Asia side of the world. I also see it here, and it's an endpoint manager. So they have some critical CVEs tied to this remote code execution. Basically, it's not the agent sitting on the endpoint. Again, this is an endpoint manager tool. Is not validating the source of the communication. And so an attacker can send spoofed packets basically and send arbitrary code. So remote code execution, and similar thing to an updater, right? This thing has an endpoint management tool like an RMM has full admin rights over the endpoint. So you can steal data. You could push ransomware, malicious payloads, whatever you wanted to it.
Right.
Last couple are kind of networking TP-Link has released some firmware updates for a vulnerability in their Amada gateways. And if you're not familiar with, I'm not going to go into details with this, just want to mention it because I know a lot of people use TP-Link in home networks or labs. I'll tell you too that TP-Link has several brands and logos, so not just TP-Link branded things.
Right.
So check that out. Lots of links in the show notes. And then F5. So nation state attack here, supposedly highly sophisticated. I have not seen the details on what they did or how they did it. But they supposedly got into some of the company's, engineering management platform.
Right. Yes.
And some of the intellectual property related to the big IP platform.
Yeah, it's their big load balancer or ADC. Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't think at this point in time that, any of the source code was manipulated. They think that the data was stolen. They don't think that anything was manipulated and that there's going to be a supply chain issue with tampering. But, some of the reports are showing like more than $600,000 internet connected devices are impacted by this. So if you have F5, and if, again, this is another one of those things that's typically internet facing, check it out and make sure you're patching that.
Yeah, they did update some emergency patches. So whenever a big company rolls out emergency patches, it's something to take seriously.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that does wrap up our news roundup. Again, tons of links in the show notes. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Packet Protector. As always, hit us up, packetpushers.net/FU if you have a question, a comment, a correction, or you want to give us a show idea or something. We do love when listeners reach out. And also a reminder, Packet Protector is part of the broader Packet Pushers podcast network. We've got 14 podcasts, all dedicated to your IT career if you want to go check it out, plus 2 weekly newsletters, our industry blog, a YouTube channel, and more. JJ, you mentioned security vegetables earlier, but since we are in the Halloween season, maybe everybody should just have some security candy today.
But not those nasty orange things.
Candy corn? I love candy corn. I love
really?
candy corn. Yes.
Nobody likes candy corn. You are a weirdo.
I'm a weirdo. Send me your candy corn if you get some in your basket. You don't want it.